Right, and we're joined by Michael Wolfe, who's running for Port Commission. So go ahead with a 2-minute introduction.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank you, Jeff, and also the members of the executive board here tonight for your time. And also I'd like to thank the members of the 36. As a fellow chair of the 37, it's always interesting for me to come to the other districts and observe their endorsements process. And I was really looking forward to this one because your process is unique amongst all the districts in King County. But of course, I'm here to talk about my race for Port Commission in December. And when I look at the port as it is right now, I keep going back and thinking about races in past years and some of the issues that keep coming up. And there's a couple recurring issues that seem to always be there at every election. And I want to work on some of these issues if I'm elected Port Commission. First of all, jobs. The port is a driver of economic development, which means they're a driver of jobs. Right now, they account for about 200,000 port-related jobs in our region, which accounts for about $9.5 billion worth of salary in the region. It's a lot of economic impact that the port has. But there's a couple areas where I think the port needs to improve how they are doing in terms of wage standards and working conditions at the port. When you look at the SeaTac Airport workers and some of the contracted workers at SeaTac Airport, they're paid minimum wage. They don't have access to health care. And these aren't the democratic values that I've espoused as a Democrat down in the 37th district. And I want to continue to work on improving their wage standards and see if we can get something done at the port. In addition, we want to work on the working conditions for the port truckers so that they can have access to basic sanitation. And there's two other issues that always come up, and I'll speak about them more, I'm sure, in your questions, and that would be freight mobility. And freight mobility is very important that we work on it as regional, and also in my background as a travel and tourism professional, I want to go ahead and work closely with the Travel and Tourism Association and the Washington Tourism Association in order to promote tourism in Washington.
Great, thank you. So now we have our 5 prepared questions, 2-minute answers to these, and Evan will start with number 1.
Yes. What is your plan to keep the Port of Seattle competitive when other ports offer similar services at lower costs?
I think there's a number of things the Port of Seattle already does that keeps it competitive, but there's a variety of things additional we probably can do. We need to continue greening the port. I know that Gail Tarleton, your current representative, state representative, did a lot of good things to make sure that the port was an environmental steward. And as we look forward through the future, a lot of the shipping lines are being pressured by their customers to do things in a more environmentally sustainable way. And so long as the port can maintain its environmental standards, which are some of the best in the industry, I think we can benefit there. In addition, I think we also have to be looking at doing some significant infrastructure investments so that we can maintain good, efficient movement on the port with the best workforce that we have here in Seattle. And I think the workers on the docks in Seattle are probably the best in the world. And we need to use them to our advantage to make our port as efficient as possible. But we also need to work on freight mobility, because what's really log-jamming freight through here and making us not competitive is the fact that our freight mobility infrastructure right now, I feel, is inadequate. And we need to start working with and partnering with regional cities, counties, the Port of Tacoma, to be able to come up with a plan to access federal dollars, which are out there, to do more freight mobility infrastructure improvement. In addition, when it comes to rates, which is a big thing, we need to somehow get together with the Port of Tacoma and find a way to work together cooperatively on rates. Because if we continue to race to the bottom on rates like we have been of recent, that is an unsustainable way to do business, because we won't then have the money to do the necessary improvements and maintenance at our seaport, and neither will Tacoma for that matter, and then those jobs will start going elsewhere. And so it's very important that we do start forming these regional partnerships to address these issues.
John, number 2.
We're going to start drilling down now. What specific plans do you have to make the port more sustainable and to limit its environmental footprint?
Well, I think the big thing that's coming up that I know that all the commissioners are going to want to work on is the Lower Duwamish cleanup. The EPA is going to be coming out of a report with, I believe this month is what I heard, and that's going to detail a lot of what is going to be needed to do that cleanup. Now, I know that Boeing has already done some cleanup along the lower Duwamish, and what they found is when they got their reports and their studies, they found there was an opportunity to do a higher level cleanup for not much more money, and so they went ahead and did it because it means they'll never have to come back and do it again. And we should, as Port of Seattle, make sure, and as a commissioner, I'll lead the effort to make sure that we don't just do whatever the EPA says we need to do, that we look further to see if we can go further than what the EPA says, so we don't have to come back and revisit this environmental cleanup. In addition, I think that the port also can do something for air quality by continuing a program for using the cruise ships to get on shore power, for encouraging low sulfur fuel by the container ships while they're in port. And I think we need to start looking at potentially changing the drayage truck fleet to clean natural gas. They are a source of air pollution through most of the Duwamish area, Georgetown, South Park, and even when they come up north into here in Inner Bay and the Fisherman's Terminal. So I think those are a number of environmental issues that I would like to work on and I'd like to lead on. And that would bring the port to be much more sustainable, much more green, which then, again, as I said earlier, would help increase their competitiveness.
Dan, number 3.
Sure. Do you support the salary increase for port commissioners? And what other changes or reforms on the port do you support?
So I was part of both appointment process, the appointment process for Gail Carlton's vacated seat and this past appointment process. And so when I actually applied and started thinking about running for this, it was for the $6,000 a year salary. The fact that during this process they raised the salary to $42,000, I welcome it because I think the commissioners do work about a 20-hour-a-week job. And I think this can do is allow candidates that may not otherwise be able to do this without some kind of better compensation than $500 a month to actually run successfully for this office. And you get a different set of qualified candidates for this office. And we saw that in the second appointment process. After they nominated, there were a number of people that came in that wouldn't have come in, I think, without that salary. So I think that it's a good thing. I think it's been needed. In terms of other reforms at the port, I think if you just look at the commission itself, there was some issues last year before about port staffing. I think the way the port commissions are staffed is perfectly appropriate, perfectly acceptable. I don't think we need to go down that road. Otherwise, we just need to be very careful. Next year, the CEO's contract is up. My understanding is he's going to go back into retirement, Commissioner, the CEO Yoshikani, and we'll probably have to hire a new commissioner. And so we want to make sure that that commissioner is, or that, not new commissioner, new CEO, I'm sorry. New CEO is someone that shares our Seattle values and shares the environmental stewardship that we have, that we love in Seattle, and shares the pro-worker working conditions and salaries that we like to see here in Seattle.
Question number 4.
What role should the Port Commission play in maintaining and increasing family wage jobs and trade jobs?
Well, I think the port plays a very important role in maintaining and increasing family wage jobs here in Seattle. Just when you look at the Fisherman's Terminal alone, every year the Fisherman's Terminal provides approximately 5,300 jobs with an average salary of $72,000 a year. And that's a good wage and good thing that the port is supporting there. And that's just one aspect of what the port does. But I think there's ways that we can improve what we do there. And as I said in my opening statement, one of the best ways would be to institute some area wage standards at the port so that even if you're a contract worker, you have to meet a minimum salary or a minimum wage that would be higher than the state's minimum wage. And we can do this with some incentives back to businesses that hire these workers by providing some healthcare incentives for them to provide employer-paid healthcare. And these things have been done at other airports in the nation, including San Jose. And at San Jose, Southwest Airlines partnered with the airport authority there to put these programs in. So it can be done. And I think we should lead and should do that here in Seattle at the airport. At the Seaport, we need to make sure that land use policies down in Soto and in Lower Squamish don't over-gentrify that area so we can maintain the good industrial jobs base there. Because those maritime industrial jobs support not only the Seaport, they support Fisherman's Terminal because they're engine manufacturers, engine repair shops, shipyards, steel mills, I mean, a whole variety of maritime industries that need to be located near the port in order for the port and the Fisherman's Terminal to be successful. So that's what I'm going to say about that. Thanks.
Well, Elizabeth, number 5.
Do you believe we have achieved full transparency in the board's contracting and compensation practices? And where do you see possibilities for further improvement?
I would say we're better than I would say the port is better than where it was. Where I think we need more improvement is in minority and women-owned businesses. And we need to do a lot of work to develop those contracts, whether they are requirements in a master contract for someone to make sure that a certain number of subcontracts, a certain percentage of subcontracts go to minority and women-owned businesses. I think that's one place where we can have improvement in our contracting. I also think that we need to make sure that we're always going out and looking for a competitive bid process, that that's an open process and we're not doing single source contracting. So there's a variety of things that I think we can do when it comes to contracting that will continue to improve how the port does its contracting. And I think it's the job of the commissioners to make sure when the port staff is coming and briefing that we ask the questions of the port staff is, how many small businesses, minority businesses, women-owned businesses are you going to require this contract to have, or are you going to break up this contract into one big and some smaller ones that small businesses can be successful at? And so it's the job of the commissioner to do oversight and to maintain accountability for the taxpayers for the money that your property tax goes to support the port.
Great, so now we'll open up to follow-up questions from the executive board. People can ask whatever they want. These are 1-minute answers. I have one, and then John, and Evan, and Clayton. I'll write that down. So your opponent was just appointed, last week, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. We'll be interviewing her tomorrow, but she'll have, 6 to 8 month head start in terms of experience on the job. I was wondering if you could specifically address why you would be better on the commission than she would be.
Well, I think I bring a different viewpoint and a different set of experience. I would bring a different set of experience to the commission. Having spent 15 years professionally in travel and tourism, it's a $5 billion industry, actually over $5 billion industry here just in Seattle and King County. $16 billion statewide, accounts for $200 million of state and local tax revenue every year. 10.2 million people came to visit Seattle last year, and the very first thing that they do is they either come through our cruise terminal or our airport. So I think with some challenges that are at the airport in terms of some infrastructure development, especially as it relates to the international terminal, which needs some serious renovation, I think it would be helpful on the commission to have someone who has the kind of experience I have in the travel and tourism industry to be on there. With relation to Ms. Bowman, I don't know her that well. I know her resume, but beyond that, I believe her.
Great, thank you. So, John and Evan.
I live in Belltown, and in order for us, either by vehicle or by foot, to get to the waterfront, we have to go through a set of tracks.
Yes.
If the port is to expand, how can they expand going north with freight or coming south with freight without having more traffic in our area? And is there a way or a thought that you have for mitigating against that rail traffic?
So I think with the port, in the Seaport area, when you're talking about expansion of containers and expansion of what we're bringing in, I think the footprint of the port in terms of where its terminals are, where its freight is going to, where the containers going to be loaded and unloaded, that probably isn't really going to change all that much. Right now, if we were to run 24/7, 365, we would be able to put through what the Port Century Agenda goal calls for at 5 million TEUs per year. and almost all of that traffic is either going to be continuing on to Chicago on rail, or it's going to be a small percentage will be local stuff. But yeah, there would be increased traffic, but I think that is a much longer term focus. I think in the near term, the issues for traffic that are going to be there are going to be potentially the coal trains for the Gateway Pacific Terminal, obviously also the arena that may or may be developed down in Soto.
Evan and then Clayton.
Sorry, I'm doing time and closure. I want to follow up on something you mentioned earlier. You talked about the idea of converting the drayage trucks to natural gas as a way of reducing greenhouse emissions. As I'm sure you know, those are all independently owned trucks.
Sure.
Or the vast majority at least. And how would you go about negotiating or bringing about a change in the way that those trucks are run? Would it be a partnership? Would it be something that the port would be able to afford given all the other tasks and things that the port has to pay for?
So what I would say is what I want to do if I'm elected port commissioner. First of all, I think that the idea that these port truckers are classified as independent owner-operators and everything, I think that's wrong. And I think that we need to work on some change in some federal laws to let them be classified as employees so that they can gain access to representation and they can organize and collectively bargain. I think that's a very important thing, and we need to work on that, and we need to lead that here in Seattle. But in terms of converting to clean natural gas, LA Long Beach did a study on this and found that the fuel costs for these drivers went down by 40 to 60% when they did use clean natural gas trucks. That's a huge savings to these guys, especially if they're being paid per piece. So it improves their economic situation. And I think the port needs to do a similar study to make sure it works here for in Seattle. And then from the results of that study, decide what avenue we would take to achieve a change for these port trucks.
Clayton.
Evan anticipated my question to a good extent. My question was simply, would you or would you not support unionization of the contract drivers? I take it you would.
Yes.
How would you implement it?
Well, I would hope that the union organizing them would be able to do their job very well and effectively to make it easier for me to do that. But I believe that the biggest issue here about the port trucks are some federal issues. There are current laws on the books about this that prevent them from being classified properly. And I think it's a longer effort to get them reclassified properly as employees.
We have time for maybe one more question.
David Kaplan rule, my second question, unrelated. That's my David use that rule.
Anybody can ask a second question.
Oh, okay. In terms of a second airport, have you given any thought to that, whether Everett is feasible as a second airport, or whether there might be another location within the metropolitan Seattle area for a second airport?
So right now, obviously, the FAA has gone through and said that the Everett Airport can be used for commercial flights. They've limited it to something like, I think, 24 flights a day. That's not a lot. It's not going to do anything to reduce noise at SeaTac. It's not going to do anything to reduce congestion on the roads leading to and from SeaTac. And honestly, I don't think that right now there's a particular need for a second airport. In the future, there might be, but that's well far off into the future, probably 30-ish years. And if we were to do that, it may make sense to look at something just over on the other side of the mountains with a high-speed rail link into downtown, so that not only are you servicing the Seattle area, but you're also serving part of eastern Washington, and you make that airport the international airport where the big planes come in, basically. And so it would actually have a larger catchment area to draw passengers from. And so it might make it more attractive. But this is a very long term. This airport isn't anywhere near its current maximum capacity, both in terms of number of flights and number of passengers.
All right, so we're about out of time. If you want to take 30 seconds for a closing statement.
Well, I want to, again, thank you all for being here today, and I look forward, of course, to hearing your recommendations and hopefully getting the endorsement of your body. As you know, I am a good Democrat, being the chair of the 37th District Democrats, and I just learned about 10 minutes before walking in here that the King County Democratic Endorsement Committee recommended me for a sole endorsement for this race. So,
Great. Thank you very much.